Have you ever judged someone by their uniform, only to realize they were the strongest person in the room? Because one arrogant CEO did exactly that. He laughed at a quiet black single father working as a gatekeeper outside his company. But minutes later, inside the boardroom, the same man would do something that left every executive standing in stunned silence. And by the time the truth about his past was revealed, the CEO wished he had never opened his mouth. Stay with this story, because the moment that changes everything happens when the door to the boardroom suddenly bursts open. The morning sun spilled across the polished glass walls of Titan Global headquarters. Expensive cars lined the driveway, executives rushed through the entrance, and standing quietly beside the front security gate was Marcus Reed. Marcus wore a simple security uniform, his posture calm and steady. To most people walking by, he looked like just another guard doing his job. But behind his quiet eyes lived years of struggle, sacrifice, and discipline. Marcus was a single father raising his 8-year-old daughter, Lila. Every morning before work, he braided her hair, packed her lunch, and walked her to the bus stop. After his wife passed away 3 years earlier from illness, Marcus became both mother and father to the little girl who believed her dad could do anything. But the world didn't always see Marcus the way Lila did. To many people, he was just the gatekeeper. At 9:15 a.m. sleek black car screeched to a stop in front of the building. The driver jumped out and opened the rear door. Out stepped Jonathan Pierce, the CEO of Titan Global. Pierce was famous in the corporate world, brilliant, wealthy, and brutally arrogant. He walked as if the ground beneath him existed only for his footsteps. Marcus nodded politely. "Good morning, sir." Pierce barely glanced at him. But then his eyes paused on Marcus's uniform and badge. He smirked. "Let me guess," Pierce said loudly enough for nearby employees to hear. "Another diversity hire standing at the gate." A few executives chuckled awkwardly. Marcus remained calm. "I'm just doing my job, sir." Pierce laughed again. "Well, make sure you keep doing it. This building runs on intelligence. Something tells me you wouldn't last 5 minutes in the boardroom." More laughter echoed near the entrance. Marcus didn't react. He simply stepped aside and opened the door. "Have a good meeting, sir." But inside Marcus's chest, a familiar ache stirred, the kind that came from years of being underestimated. Still, he had learned long ago that silence often spoke louder than anger. Upstairs, the boardroom meeting began. The room was massive. Glass walls overlooked the city skyline. 12 board members sat around a polished table worth more than Marcus's yearly salary. Pierce stood confidently at the front. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "today we finalize the international defense contract that will double Titan Global's value." Suddenly. Crash. The boardroom doors flew open. A man in dark clothing rushed inside holding something metallic in his hand. Panic erupted. Executives shouted. Chairs scraped across the floor. The man yelled, "Nobody move." Security alarms hadn't triggered yet. The building guards were still floors away. But someone else had already moved. Marcus. From the hallway outside, he had heard the commotion. Without hesitation, he pushed through the doors. Pierce spun around. "What are you doing here?" he snapped. Marcus didn't answer. His eyes locked onto the intruder's movements. Years of instinct awakened in a heartbeat. The man lunged forward, trying to grab one of the executives. And in a blur of motion, Marcus moved. 3 steps. One pivot. His hand struck the attacker's wrist with precise force. The metal object clattered to the floor. It wasn't a gun, but a heavy tactical blade. Gasps filled the room. Before the attacker could recover, Marcus twisted his arm behind his back and swept his legs out from under him. The man hit the floor hard. In less than 4 seconds, it was over. Marcus restrained him calmly while stunned executives stared in disbelief. One board member whispered, "How did he?" Another muttered, "That wasn't security training." Pierce stood frozen. Marcus calmly handed the attacker over to arriving guards. Then he simply stepped back toward the door. But one board member stopped him. "Wait." The older man leaned forward, studying Marcus carefully. "Where did you learn to move like that?" Marcus hesitated. "I served 8 years in the military," he said quietly. The room fell silent. Pierce blinked. "Military?" Marcus nodded. "Special operations." A murmur rippled around the table. Special operations. One of the most elite combat divisions in the world. The same board member asked softly, "Why are you working as a gatekeeper?" Marcus gave a small smile. "My daughter needs stability. After my wife passed, this job kept me close to home." No one laughed now. Pierce stared at Marcus differently for the first time. The man he mocked minutes ago had just protected every person in the room. But the biggest surprise was still waiting. Because one board member suddenly spoke again. "Marcus Reed, were you part of Operation Iron Shield?" Marcus paused. "Yes." The man leaned back, stunned. "You saved my son's unit in Afghanistan." The room erupted with shocked whispers. Pierce's face drained of color. The quiet gatekeeper he ridiculed was a decorated combat hero. Marcus didn't look proud. He simply nodded politely and turned toward the door again. "I should get back to my post." But before he could leave, Pierce finally spoke. "Wait." For the first time that morning, the CEO's voice wasn't arrogant. It was uncertain. Because at that moment, Jonathan Pierce realized something powerful. The strongest person in the building was the man he had mocked at the gate. And what Pierce said next would change both of their lives forever. Pierce slowly walked toward Marcus. The entire boardroom watched in silence. The arrogant CEO who once mocked the gatekeeper now stood face to face with him, unsure what to say. Pierce cleared his throat. "Mr. Reed, I owe you an apology." The words felt heavy in the room. Marcus didn't respond immediately. Pierce continued. "I judged you without knowing anything about you. And today you protected everyone here, including me." Marcus finally spoke calmly. "I didn't do it for recognition, sir. I did it because protecting people is what I've always done." The honesty in his voice made several board members nod with respect. But then one of them said something unexpected. "We need someone like him on our corporate security leadership team." Another agreed. "Not just security. Discipline like that builds organizations." Pierce looked around the table. For the first time, he realized the board admired Marcus more than they admired him in that moment. Pierce turned back. "Marcus, how would you feel about leading our entire security division?" The offer stunned everyone. Marcus looked thoughtful. "I appreciate that, sir. But my biggest job is still being a father." Pierce tilted his head. "What do you mean?" Marcus smiled slightly. My daughter gets out of school at 3 p.m. every day. I promised her I'd always be there when she needs me. The room softened at those words. A hardened combat veteran, whose greatest priority was his child. Pierce nodded slowly. Then we'll make sure you are. He extended his hand. Flexible hours. Leadership position. Triple your current salary. Marcus looked at the hand, then shook it. Not because of the money, but because the respect felt genuine. Weeks later, Marcus's life changed in ways he never expected. He moved from the gatehouse to a leadership office. But every afternoon at exactly 3 p.m., he still left the building. Because Lila waited for him at the school gate with the same excited smile. One evening she asked, "Daddy, why do people at your job treat you differently now?" Marcus knelt beside her. Because sometimes people need time to see who you really are. Lila thought for a moment. Then she said proudly, "But I always knew you were a hero." Marcus hugged her tightly. And across town, in a tall glass office, Jonathan Pierce often remembered the moment he mocked the quiet man at the gate. It became the lesson that changed how he led his entire company. Because he realized something that day every leader should remember. True strength doesn't always sit at the head of the table. Sometimes it's the quiet man standing by the door, protecting everyone inside.